Ayan, hello. So this is the third episode of the Philippine Ruby Group podcast. I'm George Mendoza. Solo flight ako ngayon kasi mukhang walang darating. Which is, okay lang. Um, ang gawin ko na lang siguro quick. I was thinking na I can do a quick, ano to? Parang quick tips on uh, reducing fat on your Rails controllers. Ang I have from the experience ko programming, I can suggest three, at least three. First, sign na meron kang Rails controller na kailangan i-refactor, yung controller mo meron siyang nag-handle siya ng multiple instance variables of different types. Pag may nakita kang ganitong, pag yung controllers mo nag-send siya ng multiple instances sa yung views, the controller is doing a lot of responsibilities. So it's either you think of moving the each instance variable to its own controller, or you think of a more general class that can handle that can group those instance variables into one. So recently, I'm working on the e-commerce part of our website, and we need to add some shipment to our order. Nakikita ko doon sa controller namin na marami siyang instance variables. Na nag-accept siya ng shipping address from the user, at the same time kinoconsider niya rin yung kung ano yung mga items sa cart, etc. Naisip ko na instead of trying to handle all those different inputs from the user as well as from the cart, I created a class called order checkout, which groups handles all those variables together. So that's one advice I can give, which is when you have multiple instance variables sa yung controller, pag-isipan mo kung if you can group them into a single class para mas madali, para yung handling niya is outside the controller and it's easier to test. Number two, another code smell na nakikita ko sa mga fat na Rails controllers is yung controller na maraming custom actions. An example, again, yung sa aming controller, meron kaming controller for handling orders. Previously, it only handled cash orders that are paid through cash. Eventually, nagkaroon ng bagong feature na to be able to redeem an order using points. What happened with the controller is that we added two actions to the controller specifically for redemption. So there's something like a new redemption action and a create redemption action. What I realized with this approach is that it's not maintainable. Again, your controller is doing two jobs. One for handling orders where the payment is through cash, and the other is through redemption. A better approach would have been to move the redemption actions into their own controller. So you would have something like order redemption, a new action for order redemption, and create action for an order redemption. Um, I find nakikita ko tong pattern na to sa mga very common pag meron kang transaction na um, meron kang transaction na nangangailangan ng two actions, one for displaying the form, for submitting the form, and the other to process that form. And in these cases, I try to avoid adding those two actions to existing controllers. I think of the transaction, and then I create a controller specifically for that transaction. This also works if you have an action. If you have this works if you also have for actions that involve batch processing. Like if you have an action that has to do several up to update multiple records at one time. So instead of adding custom actions for example, you want to update an example. Let's say you have a task controller, and you want an action that will update multiple tasks. Custom action to update all of those tasks. I find it more manageable to create a new controller that has only two actions, new and create. And usually I create a new class, a new service class. Call it maybe for this instance batch, and that will handle the updates of the task, multiple tasks. So that's the second code smell I find with Rails controllers. If you have too many custom controller actions. The third one is when you have third code smell I find is when you have private methods, especially those with parameters within the Rails controller. My feeling with private methods is that they should be treated as methods. Private methods are public methods that were made private. So it's private methods is not an excuse to just add random utility helpers to a controller. The methods your private methods must they're part actual class. They're like the AP. They are still API of your classes. The only difference the only difference between private methods and public methods is that public methods are visible while private methods are not. So with controllers, if you have private methods that accept arguments, it's best if this is usually a case wherein you think those private methods are doing something else that can be moved outside of the controller. So you think in terms of the input those private methods are receiving, and see if those input can be encapsulated into their own classes. So those are code smells I find with fat Rails controllers. When your Rails controllers handle multiple instance variables, when you have custom controller actions that could be moved to another class, to another controller, and if you have private methods with parameters within the Rails controller, within your Rails controller. So that's it. That's it for me. I hope you learned something interesting with. Maybe next week we can have, or maybe next week or in next 2 weeks we'll cover this. We'll cover these Rails controllers more in depth when we have more people coming into this podcast. This is George Mendoza. Thank you very much for listening. Hope to see you again all next time.